8. World War I shipwreck. During low tide after a violent storm back in 2019, the ruins of a World War I-era German shipwreck washed up along Britain's Cornish coast. The British Navy was towing the 60-foot, 3-masted, steel-hulled vessel called the SV Carl to London over a century ago in 1917, with plans to scrap it, when it suddenly got stuck on a reef during a storm and broke free. The hull seemed undamaged, so 2 attempts were made to try and refloat the ship, but their efforts in both attempts were unsuccessful, and the SV Carl was ultimately declared a total loss. It was abandoned in place and eventually became buried by sand and silt. The ship has occasionally popped back up over the years, giving beachgoers an opportunity to witness the ghastly historic wreck firsthand in person. It most often appears during winter, when fierce storms wash away the sand covering it up, but the vessel is never exposed for very long before it once again disappears beneath the water and sediment. The sand has helped preserve the SV Carl, which is in surprisingly good shape for its old age. It's just one of almost 6,000 shipwrecks along the 250-mile Cornish coastline, which is known for its unforgiving and challenging weather. 7. Clumps of palm oil. In 2017, at least 13 of Hong Kong's beaches were covered with foul-smelling, styrofoam-like clumps of congealed palm oil. The strange substance spilled into the region when 2 large vessels crashed into each other in the Pearl River estuary. Even after mainland Chinese authorities learned of the accident, it took them 2 days to inform officials in Hong Kong. Several days into the palm oil spill, the Hong Kong government told media outlets that it had cleaned over 55 tons of the material so far. But they still had their work cut out for them. According to the press, more than 1,100 tons of palm oil had spilled into the water altogether. On one beach along the shore of the Llama Island, workers collected 110 garbage bags full of the waste. In a statement, the government reassured the public that palm oil was non-toxic and harmless. But because of the sheer amount of it, and because laboratory tests were still being conducted, officials decided to lean on the side of being safe rather than sorry, and closed all the affected nearby beaches. The incident came only a year after giant piles of garbage washed up along Hong Kong's shores, with packaging and labels on the trash indicating that it came from somewhere in mainland China. Conservationists use it as an opportunity to highlight the devastating environmental impacts of companies who dispose of waste improperly by simply dumping it into the ocean. 6. Huge humpback whale. One day in August 2022, a massive, bloated, 49-foot-long whale carcass washed up on Manhattan Beach in San Francisco's Half Moon Bay. Spectators first spotted the creature while it was in the water, and a crowd of onlookers gathered as it slowly approached shore. According to the Marine Mammal Center, the whale most likely died from blunt force trauma after being hit by a ship. In a statement, Director of Pathology Dr. Padraig Duignan said the whale had an extensive contusion over her right chest area, a fractured vertebra, and her skull was dislocated from her spinal column. He also explained that, based on the condition of her skin, internal tissues, and organs, the whale was already in a moderate stage of decomposition by the time she washed up. While humpback whales frequently visit the waters off the California coast during that time of the year before migrating south toward Mexico, it's not exactly a common sight for a dead one to show up on the beach, but it's also not completely unheard of. According to the Marine Mammal Center, there were 10 whale deaths throughout the Bay Area in 2022 alone. 7 of them were gray whales and 3 were humpbacks. Experts determined that 4 of them had been struck and killed by ships. 1 died from malnutrition and another likely passed away due to an orca attack. The other causes of death were undetermined. 5. Hundreds of thousands of tires. Like many other shorelines in the world, Wrightsville Beach, North Carolina is suffering from coastal erosion thanks to the intensifying weather from climate change. To combat the problem, federal authorities started funding an effort to re-nourish Wrightsville Beach, which they hope to finish by the summer of 2023. But the Army Corps of Engineers, who were recruited to help with the massive project, ran into an unexpected obstacle in 2022 when they found out about 300,000 tires during a survey of the area. Most of the tires were underwater near the shoreline, in an area where they originally planned to dig for sand to use in the project. At the time of the discovery, experts believe that there could be as many as 500,000 tires left in the water. The practice of using tires as artificial reefs ended back in the 1980s, but it cost way too much money to remove them altogether. Army Corps of Engineers spokesperson Dave Connolly told local station WECT that the tires were likely once part of an artificial reef for marine life that was deliberately sunk during the 1970s. Because federal authorities are required to follow environmental laws, their options for where to dig for sand were limited to begin with. After the tires were found, engineers had no other option but to dig around them for the sand they needed. One thing is clear: as coastal erosion accelerates, time is of the essence in coastal preservation, and they need to get the renourishment done as quickly as possible, regardless of what types of objects or obstacles stand in the way. Did you know they used to use tires as reefs? Let us know in the comments, and subscribe if you liked the video so far. 4. Olympic swimming platform. Just days before swimming events were supposed to start at the 2016 Olympics in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, a storm washed the official starting pontoon off its concrete platform and down into the water at Copacabana Beach. The broken apparatus later washed up along the shore, but there wasn't enough time to fix it before the competition. By then, Olympic officials had already come under criticism for their decision to host the event in open water. In particular, Copacabana Bay was discovered to contain 1.7 million times the viral level that's considered risky in the United States and Europe, posing serious health and safety concerns for athletes. Some swimmers were so worried that they planned to take antibiotics or drink Coca-Cola in order to prevent pathogens from surviving in their systems. The issue with the broken platform only added to the long list of reasons why many thought the open swim area was a bad idea. Despite everything, Olympic organizers decided that the show must go on. The problems only continued from there. At the beginning of the grueling 10-kilometer race, a starting gun was heard before the official flag was raised, stirring confusion among the participants. But the swim still commenced, regardless of any and all concerns. 3. Ancient walrus skull. In 1995, a fisherman found an ancient walrus skull off the coast of Virginia. Realizing that he might have stumbled upon something of historical value, he took the artifact to experts at the Virginia Living Museum. Scientists were shocked when they saw the skull, which they estimated could be about 80,000 years old, but was most likely 10,000 years old. At the time, the world was going through its most recent ice age, and the climate in what is now eastern United States was more like the Arctic. Measuring 14 inches from the base to the tip, the skull has two 7-inch long tusks. It's remarkably well preserved, with the entire artifact intact except a portion of the left cheekbone. After the discovery, paleontologist Timmy Cutter told the Virginian Pilot that most ancient walrus skulls found in the region were broken in half between the tusks and the brain cavity, making this newly found skull a very rare specimen. In fact, Cutter said he had never seen such a well-preserved skull in the entirety of the 8 years he had been working in the area. Since the climate was much colder at the time the walrus lived, it's possible that the creature died in the same area where the skull was found. But there was also a thriving walrus trade during the Viking era that spanned over a 2,485-mile route from Greenland to modern-day Kiev. And while what is now Virginia wasn't anywhere along the way, extremely old walrus skulls have been found at other beaches that were along the trade route, including in Norway. More than anything, the evidence found today is a surprising reminder of how much different the world's climate was only a few thousand years ago, and an impressive example of the far-reaching trade networks that once existed in the absence of modern technology. 2. Lady Liz Shipwreck. Built in England during the late 19th century, the 223-foot-long Lazy Elizabeth was a 3-masted iron bark that replaced an older ship of the same name. For over 30 years, she hauled cargo throughout the world's vast oceans. Over the years, the vessel was in multiple accidents. In one particularly brutal incident in 1884, she faced a hurricane and suffered substantial damage. Her poop deck was destroyed, and her sails were either lost or extremely damaged. Luckily, the ship managed to make it to Sydney and underwent repairs. One of the strangest parts of the Lazy Elizabeth's history came between 1906 and 1912, when 2 crew members somehow mysteriously vanished after coming down with malaria. At the time, Captain Julius Ho was in command. The strange series of events started not long after the vessel left Peru. A crew member named Granquis got sick almost immediately, followed by another crew member a few days later. A third man soon started complaining about not feeling well, but he didn't get nearly as sick as the other 2. Captain Ho prescribed a few remedies to the trio and let them up on the deck to get fresh air. Granquis suddenly went missing though, and the rest of the crew couldn't find him. The weather was calm, so it was unlikely that he fell overboard, at least by accident. A short while later, the other seriously ill man vanished. No evidence of either person was ever found. It's certainly possible that they became delirious from the illness and took their own lives, but the truth of their fates remain a mystery to this day. The Lady Elizabeth's career came to an unexpected end in 1912 after leaving Vancouver for Mozambique. She met strong gales, lost most of her cargo, and sustained heavy damage. The captain took a detour to get some repairs made, and the ship struck a rock, breaking the hull apart. When the ship reached Port Stanley, she was declared unseaworthy. The Falkland Island Company later bought the Lady Elizabeth and repurposed her as a floating timber warehouse. In 1936, a fierce storm battered the vessel, breaking her free from her moorings. She was pushed by the storm and ran into a sandbar, where opportunistic thieves repeatedly looted her for wood and valuables. The ship remains there today, where she's become little more than a rusting eyesore in the distance. An attempt was made to turn the Lady Elizabeth into a floating museum, but the effort failed to gather the financial support it needed. 1. Millions of cigarettes. Tobacco use is strongly discouraged in many countries, and for good reason. It was proven long ago that smoking cigarettes can cause devastating health issues with the potential to shorten or end a person's life. But many people still do it, and as long as there's a demand for it, tobacco will continue to be one of the countless items shipped across the world's oceans and seas on cargo ships. In early 2014, a Maersk vessel called the Svendborg encountered a brutal storm in the Bay of Biscay off the coast of western France while heading to Sri Lanka. As the ship battled 30-foot and hurricane-force winds, shipping containers started to fall off the boat and into the sea. At first, Maersk reported that only 70 cargo containers had been lost overboard, but it was later revealed that the ship lost about 517 containers. It was the largest recorded container loss ever in a single incident. According to the company, around 85% of the containers were empty, and none contained hazardous substances that might put the environment at risk. But in an ideal situation, almost anything that doesn't naturally dwell or exist in the ocean should be removed from it, and French authorities began searching for any and all lost containers. It wasn't long before containers were spotted in various places, including as far away as the East Devon coast in southern England. One 40-foot, which contained an estimated 15.5 tons of cigarettes, washed up on one of the area's nearby beaches. Thankfully, a lot of the cargo found floating along the shoreline managed to avoid getting waterlogged and was put into storage so that it could eventually be transported to its intended destination. French environmentalists were less than impressed by the incident and announced that they planned to sue Maersk for failing to disclose the true extent of their cargo losses.
Number 9. The Ferrari F40 of Saddam Hussein's son. In 2020, during the peak of COVID-19, a car enthusiast and YouTuber named Scott Chivers, or Rada Rosa, was delivered unbelievable news. An abandoned Ferrari F40 was left at a service station in Iraq. Chivers was amazed, but there was something else. The car actually belonged to the son of Saddam Hussein. The son, Uday, was just as much of a car fanatic as Chivers. He amassed a large collection of sports cars and supercars during his father's reign of terror. Out of the entire collection, the F40 was his pride and joy. Many of Uday's other vehicles were reportedly burned and destroyed by his father, supposedly to teach his wayward son a lesson. It was a miracle the Ferrari was left unscathed. As any good YouTuber would do, Chivers posted a video about the car while figuring out how to get it out of the country. After all, it was the middle of the pandemic when travel restrictions were swinging in full force. The car also came with some political baggage, thanks to its previous owner, so as a result, it was unlikely Iraqi officials would let it be taken out of the country. The F40 wasn't in great condition either. It was covered in dust and grime, which had even seeped into the interior of the vehicle through the vents. The supposed new owner of the vehicle also wanted a very steep price, $1.3 million. It wouldn't just be the Iraqi authorities that didn't want the car sold. Saddam Hussein's daughter also put out a message threatening anyone who helped take the car out of the country. With all things said and done, Chivers started having second thoughts about taking the car home. Sadly, the F40 still remains abandoned in Iraq to this day. At number 8, a Mercedes-Benz SLR McLaren. In the Czech Republic, a Mercedes-Benz SLR McLaren was left abandoned among the weeds. Its intricate white paintwork is now covered in grime, and it's even got moss growing on it. But why is such an amazing car just rotting away? Well, the Mercedes is actually inside a police impound lot. The car was involved in a complex case involving theft and a leasing company. Due to the scale of the investigation and the inquiry, it has still not been solved. Because of this, the car has sat abandoned, unable to be moved or sold until the case is closed. It's pretty sad that one of the fastest supercars of its time and a collaboration between two of the world's most iconic brands is just sitting untouched. Who knows if the car can even run anymore? Number 7. The abandoned supercars of the United Arab Emirates. You might think it'd be rare that someone would have to get rid of their luxury supercar, but there is one place in the world where thousands of expensive cars are abandoned each year. The problem belongs to the United Arab Emirates. The abandoned cars have become so common that news is spread all over the world. One of the cars that was left is a Ferrari Enzo. The vehicle, which is worth over $1 million, has been sitting for so long that you can barely see its paint job underneath all the dust. People were outraged at the fact that such an iconic car was abandoned. Some even incorrectly blamed citizens of the United Arab Emirates for being so rich that they simply didn't care about their vehicles once they had a new one. They thought they simply left them on the side of the road and forgot about them. But the real reason why all these supercars are abandoned is much more serious. Most of the cars were bought by people who moved to expensive cities like Dubai in search of high-paying jobs. But when the financial crisis hit and oil prices fell, many found themselves unable to afford their luxury cars. Debt is a serious crime in the United Arab Emirates, so many chose to flee the country to avoid legal charges being brought against them. Even defaulting on a credit card or a loan payment could land a person in prison. And prison facilities in the UAE are some of the toughest in the world. This is why many of the cars are left in or near airport car parks. Some of them still have the keys in the ignition. It's believed that the Ferrari Enzo we mentioned earlier belonged to a British expat, but there are many other cars found on the streets. The vehicles are only really moved if they cause an obstruction to the flow of traffic or work, since there are simply too many of them for officials to keep up with. Other than the Ferrari, there's cars such as Lamborghinis, Porsches, Bentleys, Nissan Skylines, and even a Honda NSX has been found. When the authorities finally impound the vehicles, they're often sent straight to auction. Lucky bidders can then purchase them at a fraction of the cost that would have been originally, meaning almost anyone can snap up a supercar. Let's just hope that they can keep up with the repayments, otherwise the cycle will just repeat. If you had the chance to buy a supercar for cheap, which one would you get? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget, hit that subscribe button. At number 6, a Porsche 911 Targa S. In 2016, a new homeowner made an incredible discovery in his recently bought barn. There, rotting in the back, was a Porsche 911 Targa S. Although there are many 911s in the world, this one is special. It's one of the very first Targas ever made. It was originally built in 1969. Only 925 were ever made with the same S engine, short wheelbase, and soft window. But after being bought new, the Porsche was left in a garage for decades from 1977 to 2016 when it was found. That's 39 years. Although the car was in a sorry state after being abandoned, the new owner decided they would fix it up, so he sent it to Porsche Classic for restoration. The car was rusting and very rare. As a result, it was not a quick job for the restorers, who had to source parts for the over 50-year-old Porsche. Some of the parts even had to be remade by hand, like the soft window and the roof covering. Artisans had to produce a near-identical roof cover, and even went as far as copying the exact stitching that would have been on the original. With everything painstakingly restored and with a fresh coat of red paint, the 911 Targa looked like it did when it rolled out of the factory. Its new owner did have a lot of patience, considering the restoration took more than 3 years to finish. At number 5, a Mercedes 300 SL. Not many classic cars are as striking as the Mercedes 300 SL. This 50s motor, with its curving chassis and futuristic doors, is considered one of the most beautiful cars Mercedes-Benz has ever made. But in Cuba, one of these vehicles has become a sort of a legend. Not because it was in an automotive museum, but instead, it was abandoned in the middle of nowhere, with only a few people knowing its location. This didn't stop car photographer Piotr Degler, who had been photographing other vehicles on the island in 2014. For a while, Cuba's car scene was stuck in the 1950s, thanks to poor relations with the US, when he heard about the legendary Mercedes. This prompted Degler to go on a 2,000-mile hunt across the country to find the vehicle. Everywhere he went, he asked people whether they had heard anything about the Mercedes, and after almost a month, things seemed hopeless. That was until the last few days of Degler's trip to Cuba, when he finally found the car sitting under a banana tree. It was in poor shape, with one of its gullwing doors slightly ajar, its engine missing, and a rusting hole in its hood. Its headlights had long since been broken out of their casings, and plants were growing up and around the wheels. Degler took care while photographing the car, spending the entire day capturing it inside and out before returning home. Thankfully, this meant that others would see the vintage Mercedes motor without having to travel all the way to Cuba. Number 4. 144 exotic cars in Vietnam. In a Vietnam warehouse, there's not just one supercar wasting away, but 144 of them. As you would expect, there are some impressive names among the cars, including a Ferrari F40 Spider, a Maserati Gran Turismo, multiple Rolls-Royces, Range Rovers, Mercedes, and many more. Their value could easily be in the tens of millions of dollars. But why are all of these amazing cars just sitting inside? The vehicles were impounded by officials in Hanoi back in 2013 after a car trafficking operation was uncovered. The size of the trafficking ring was substantial, with over 600 high-end cars having illegally entered Vietnam. On May 5, 2013, Vietnamese authorities made arrests after discovering 15 vehicles traveling to China. The information on the rest of the cars soon followed, leading them to be seized and brought to the warehouse that they now call home. The question remains as to what the Vietnamese authorities will do with the cars, especially since they've been left for so long. It's unclear whether they're still being held as evidence or for further prosecutions, but it seems likely that they will follow the lead of other countries and perhaps one day be put up for auction. Number 3. The Gallery of Abandoned Supercars. Pictures feature a Bugatti rusting away in the woods. Another photo shows a Veyron collecting dust in a garage, resting on a wooden pallet next to a bag of trash. In others, cobwebs cover Pagani Huayras sitting in the dark, with their striking silver and neon green paint jobs no longer gleaming. Other sorry vehicles include a Ferrari, a Rolls-Royce, and a Lamborghini, each of them caked in layers of dust. But who would do this to some of the most beautiful supercars on the planet? It was Fabian Oberhammer, And there is one bright side. The images aren't actually real. They are 3D renders created by the digital artist. So what inspired Oberhammer, who goes by Dizzy Viper online, to create this artwork? He chose to use new and expensive cars as the centerpieces for his art, since it's unthinkable that someone would want to abandon them. Oberhammer's goal was to show how, as fossil fuel reserves run out, cars like this with conventional combustion engines will soon become obsolete. Some people have become so convinced by Oberhammer's artwork that they've even offered to buy the cars in the pictures. The artist reported that one man approached him offering $800,000 for the Ferrari shown in his work. Although it's not real now, the shape of the automotive industry is quickly changing, with more and more vehicles switching to electric power, including some supercars. Who knows when photos like those that Oberhammer has imagined will become reality. Number 2. The destroyed supercars of Typhoon Hinnamnor. Typhoon Hinnamnor swept across South Korea in October of 2022, hitting the capital city, Seoul. Widespread flooding caused chaos, death, and destruction around the country. Among the casualties were some of the world's most expensive supercars: a $500,000 Lamborghini Aventador, a $200,000 Lamborghini Huracan, and a $190,000 McLaren 570S were just a few wrecked by the floodwaters. The vehicles were coated in mud and trash that had collected as the water surged around them before receding. One Porsche even had a trash bag on top of its hood and was so caked in mud that it looked like it just got a brown paint job. It's unknown exactly how many cars were lost, but the value is expected to be in the millions. Number 1. A 1962 Aston Martin DB4. Looking at the pictures on eBay of this rusted old sports car, its teal blue paint job spotted with rust and grime would probably make you think it should just be scrapped. But the listing price for this vehicle was $325,000, and for good reason. The car, even in its sorry state, is a 1962 Aston Martin DB4. It was left in a barn for over 30 years, but it does have a sweet story. The car's original owner was the manager of a body shop and decided to make repairs on the Aston Martin himself. One of his employees worked tirelessly with him to fix up the motor, after which his boss ended up giving him the car. The employee brought it home to continue restoring it, but sadly never got around to it, so his hard work sat rusting in the barn just outside of New York. The interior is in poor condition as well. The leather seats are dried up and cracked, and the footwells are full of grime and debris. The sheer amount of dust around the gear stick is a testament to the fact that the vehicle hasn't moved in years. So why was it listed for such a high price? It's because whoever buys this car will probably make a huge profit. Although it will cost a small fortune to restore and likely take a few years, once back to its former glory, its price tag could reach into the millions. A restored 1962 Aston Martin DB4 was put up for sale in Sotheby's auction house back in 2021. The final price at the end of the bidding was a whopping $9,520,000. Talk about a return on your investment.
4. Military sites revealed by Google. Sanctions on Putin's government are still being applied as Russia continues its war against Ukraine. With many major world economies imposing sanctions on Russia, the country is gradually starting to become isolated. The sanctions have an impact on citizens' lives in many ways, including on economic and technical fronts. Many foreigners are leaving the nation or expressing their unhappiness with the prolonged conflict. Putin's perspective has not budged an inch, though. By gradually eliminating each of its services, Google is making progress against the war-hungry country. The US-based business hasn't made the decision to completely exit the nation yet. Nevertheless, they continue to move forward with penalties against Russia. Hidden military and geopolitical sites in Russia have suddenly been made public on Google Maps. The country will probably decide to ban Google sooner or later thanks to these retaliations. It's only a matter of time. Many of their classified military and strategic facilities are no longer hidden by Google Maps and are now easy targets. These essential locations are now visible to any curious person with a computer. With fairly good resolution, all classified Russian sites, including ICBMs, command stations, and more, have been made totally public. A few pictures of what looked to be a number of submarines, along with other military hardware, were posted online. Among these photographs, there was the Admiral Kuznetsov aircraft carrier, a nuclear weapons storage facility close to Murmansk, submarines in Kamchatka, a peninsula in the Far East, and a military airbase in Kursk, a city in western Russia. The border between Russia and Ukraine, one of the main scenes of this war, is only 150 kilometers, 93.2 miles away from Kursk. The persistent tensions between Russia and Google were even discussed by a local Moscow media source. The major web company no longer gives Russian consumers who run commercials ad monetization. And that's just one of the things Google is doing. The Kremlin's invasion of Ukraine was directly addressed by this decision to stop monetization. Afterwards, Google's company YouTube has been accused by Russian authorities of inciting an information war. The goal of this is to protest YouTube's decision to ban Russian state media from the site altogether. It should also be mentioned that Russian developers have suffered greatly as a result of GitHub's decision to block their accounts. While there are many good people still in Russia, the country's decision to enter war with Ukraine will have lasting consequences on not only its citizens, but with international relationships as well. The revealed strategic military bases are likely just step one in the world turning against Putin's government. What do you think is going to happen to Russia after the war with Ukraine? Let us know your thoughts in the comments down below, and be sure to subscribe to the channel if you like the video so far. 3. Shar Idol. The so-called Shar Idol was initially discovered by gold prospectors in 1890 at the bottom of a peat swamp in Russia's Ural mountain range. The unique piece is a 9-foot-tall, 2.7-meter, totem pole made of 10 combined wooden pieces that have been carved with expressive features, eyes, and limbs. It's embellished with geometric patterns and is the earliest surviving example of wooden ritual art in the world. Even a century after its discovery, archaeologists are still learning new things about this incredible relic. The sculpture could be about 900 years older than previously thought, according to a recent study by prehistoric studies professor Thomas Terberger of Germany's Göttingen University. Terberger's team believes the item was probably made around 12,500 years ago, near the end of the last ice age. They claim that the artifact's prehistoric makers cut it from a larch tree with 159 or so growth rings. The latest discoveries show that the priceless work of art is over 7,000 years older than Stonehenge, which was built 5,000 years ago. Additionally, it's twice as old as the Egyptian pyramids, which were created 4,500 years ago. The age of the Shar sculpture has baffled academics for decades. The controversy has significant ramifications for the study of prehistory, which frequently emphasizes a Western-centric perspective on human evolution. Russian scientists carbon dated the relic to be from about 9,500 years ago. This was done in 1997, but many in the scientific community thought these findings weren't plausible. Reluctant to believe that hunter-gatherer communities in the Urals and Siberia created art or formed cultures, says Terberger to The Times, researchers instead presented a narrative of human evolution that's centered around European history, with ancient farming societies in the Fertile Crescent eventually sowing the seeds of Western civilization. Historians were hesitant to shift away from these teachings. The wooden piece was once again examined in 2018 and estimated to be 11,600 years old by experts including Terberger using accelerator mass spectrometry techniques. This origin date has now been further advanced by the team's most recent publication. The artifact was produced as a piece of mobiliary art, or portable art with ritual meaning, based on the intricate markings etched into the hardwood surface. The 8 faces may include coded references to some kind of creation story or the barrier between the earth and the sky. According to co-author Svetlana Savchenko, the curator in charge of overseeing the object at the Sverdlovsk Regional Museum of Local Lore. It is truly a wonder in and of itself that this uncommon example of hunter-gatherer artwork has survived through millennia. The Russian peat bog's acidic, antibacterial climate kept the wooden totem intact for ages. 2. 5 new islands. 5 new Arctic islands were uncovered by receding glaciers and discovered by the Russian Navy. The islands were first seen in 2016 using satellite images, but they were only verified and charted during a mission to the area. The isolated Novaya Zemlya archipelago, in the Arctic Ocean northwest of the Russian peninsula, has the new islands near the Vilky Glacier. They have an area ranging from 900 to 54,500 square meters, about 9,690 to 586,630 square feet. The expedition leader, Alexander Moiseyev, said that since the islands have been found, they will be given names. According to the Defense Ministry, Russian Navy scientists have been analyzing coastal changes with satellite data for years. They confirmed over 30 additional islands, capes, and bays throughout the 2 archipelagos of Novaya Zemlya and Franz Josef Land between 2015 and 2018. The 5 islands were originally discovered in 2016 by a student named Marina Migunova during her final qualifying exam, according to the Defense Ministry. She's currently a Navy engineer providing oceanographic measuring services. Before an expedition set sail in mid-August to examine the islands in person, researchers took pictures and performed topographical assessments of them. Many scientists agree that these islands aren't just the result of shifting tectonic plates, but the result of climate change. Compared to other parts of the world, the Arctic's temperature is rising twice as fast. By 2100, up to a fifth of the world's population could be displaced due to rising sea levels if glaciers keep melting at the current rate. Millions of people could experience food and water shortages, and pollution could cause public health disasters. 1. The Romanov Family. For almost 3 centuries, the Romanov family ruled the Russian Empire from 1613 to 1918. The last imperial family, the Romanovs, had ancestors like Peter the Great, Catherine the Great, and Tsar Nicholas II. A total of 18 Romanovs took the throne over their reign. Nicholas, Alexander III's oldest son, was the last chosen heir. Alexander, though, could not prepare his son for the Russian throne that was riddled with political unrest. Alexander was a strong autocrat who thought the Tsar should rule with an iron grip. He outlawed speaking languages other than Russian inside the empire, repressed journalistic freedom, and undermined political institutions. Nicholas then inherited a turbulent Russia. On May 30th, 1896, Nicholas ordered a mass celebration for his coronation. As part of the festivities, temporary theaters and pavilions were erected. Items such as bread, memento cups, sausage, beer, and chocolates were among the presents given to the public. The days after ended in tragedy, as over 1,000 of Nicholas's subjects were killed in a crowd rush. The crowd of 100,000 people entered the festival after it was opened. Sadly, many were crushed in the process, and the official estimate revealed 1,389 fatalities. The incident is known as the Kodinka tragedy for the city in which it took place. The stampede happened around 6 a.m. and is believed to have broken out because there weren't enough sausages and beer for everyone. This sort of bad luck plagued the last Tsar's reign and solidified the growing gulf between the Russian people and the monarchy. Things worsened when the Tsar engaged in an unpopular war over territory with Japan and gained the nickname Nicholas the Bloody when his government killed over 100 citizens in 1905 during a peaceful assembly. The ruler's son, Alexei, who was the crown prince, suffered from hemophilia. Wanting to keep the condition secret from the public, the Empress Alexandra, his wife, leaned heavily on the mysterious figure Grigory Rasputin, who she thought spared Alexei's life. Finding Rasputin cloaked in shadows and mystery, rumored to be involved in the occult, the Empress's relationship with Rasputin did nothing to improve public relations. Things just kept getting worse for the Romanovs. In 1914, Russia was drawn into World War I. Russia lost more people than any other empire in the conflict, with 1.8 million service members and 1.5 million civilians. Any remaining authority Nicholas might have had over the nation was diminished by war. The food system, transportation, and the population all collapsed when men were not able to cultivate at home. Initially resistant to ceding power, Nicholas finally stepped down from being ruler in March 1917. Bolshevik revolutionaries led by Vladimir Lenin gained control of the government in November 1917. Given that his wife was the granddaughter of Queen Victoria, Nicholas tried persuading the British and later the French to grant him refuge. The Romanovs ended up in the hands of the newly established revolutionary government, since both nations flat out refused. The magnificent, lavish existence the Romanovs led at the Winter Palace in St. Petersburg was drastically different from their new home. The Empress Alexandra and Prince Nicholas were both in denial and insisted that they would be spared. They were eventually kept prisoner in a residence known as the House of Special Purpose by the Bolsheviks. The Romanov family was finally awakened in the middle of the night on July 16, 1918, and told to get ready to move. The ladies gathered their belongings in a last-ditch effort to escape and put on clothes that were stuffed with cash, religious mementos, and jewelry. They were ordered to line up after going into the basement of their Ipatiev house, their last residence. After they were positioned as if they were going to take a picture, the Bolshevik troops shot the Romanov family to death, execution style. They were buried afterwards. A few days later, the Bolsheviks told the world of the Tsar's death, and the party increased their political influence. Newspapers and party publications exaggerated Nicholas's alleged frailty and vilified his reign. The official party line said the Tsar's wife and family were being cared for in a secret location, but suspicions about what actually happened to Alexandra and her children started to circulate. Every member of the Romanov family and their associates were then killed by the Bolsheviks. In just 84 days, 27 more people died. They were buried in mass graves. Stories about potential survivors persisted as years went by, and some imposters declared themselves to be the Romanovs. But their strange deaths made room for rumors and plenty of conspiracy theories. The most famous is the story of a surviving heir. Many women have come forward throughout the years claiming to be the princess of the Romanov family. This story lasted nearly a century, but the most convincing woman was Anna Anderson. In 1922, she appeared in Berlin and identified herself as Anastasia. Although the majority of the extended Romanov family believed she was a fraud, her allegations attracted public attention. In 1927, a private inquiry financed by the brother of Tsarina Alexandra revealed that Anna Anderson was really just a mentally ill Polish factory worker named Franciszka Szkanskowska. Alexander Avdonin, a geologist, started asking about the location of the Romanovs' burial in the 1970s after growing up hearing legends. In 1979, he located the site near the location of the Russian home where the family was held captive. He and a companion started to exhume the bones from the site. They reburied the remains out of the concern for the Soviet government's retaliation. Avdonin requested a probe in 1988, but this came after the Soviet Union relaxed its position on talking about the Romanovs. In 1991, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, a mass burial in the Ural Mountains was found. The identities of Nicholas, Alexandra, and their 3 daughters were later established through DNA testing. Until a second cemetery was found next to the bigger mass grave in 2007, no one knew what became of Alexei and one of his sisters. It was eventually determined that the grave's contents, 2 bodies, belonged to Alexei and one of his sisters, likely Anastasia or Maria. The specialists tested for gender, age, relationship with each other, and Romanov ancestry. The DNA reports revealed that the bones were beyond a doubt from the Romanov family. One of the specialists was quoted saying that the odds of the bones not being the Romanovs were 1,000,000,000 to 1. The Romanovs' buried remains were put in the St. Petersburg Cathedral in 1998, and the Russian Orthodox Church later designated them saints. Thanks for watching. Which of these discoveries did you find the most interesting? Let us know in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe to the channel. We'll see you next time.